Assalamualaikum and good day. So for this presentation, we will be discussing the audit program application. In audit program application, we will be tackling about the transaction cycles, test of controls, substantive test of transaction, substantive test of balances, auditing fair value measurement and disclosure, and using the work of others. So before we start, let me introduce myself. I am Raja Mujaid and your first reporter for this presentation. First, we will discuss the transaction cycles test of controls. So when it comes to audit, pag tayo ay nagpa-perform ng mga procedures, normally we perform that by cycles. So ano ba meaning ng transaction cycle? So transaction cycle, yan yung mga sequence of procedures applied in processing a particular type of transactions. So kumbaga, yan yung related transaction na ginagamit sa isang cycle. So, pag sinabi nating transaction cycles, mayroon tayong lima. So, the first cycle that I will discuss is the revenue cycle or the sales and collection cycles. So, what is the nature of revenue cycle? So, it encompasses both sales of goods and services to customer and the collection of cash. So, what are the business functions associated with these cycles? So we have two. The first one is the resources are sold to customer in exchange for promises of future payment. So number two, cash is collected from customers. So yung dalawa na yan, yung pinaka main functions of revenue cycles. So goods are sold to customer and cash is collected from customers for payment. So what now the common activities in these cycles? So we have different documents and records in revenue cycles. So we have five, the customer order. Customer order is a request from a customer to purchase goods. So the next one is the sales order. Sales order is identified goods ordered by the customer, including the relevant information about the price, the quantity, payment terms, and the other shipping documents like sales invoice and the customer remittance advice. So the next one is the shipping document. So shipping document represents the contract between the seller and the carrier. So the next one is the sales invoice. Sales invoice is a document used to bill the customer. It identifies the goods sold, the quantity, and the price in terms of the payment. And the last one is the customer remittance advice. So into a company, sales invoice but intended to be returned, which with the customer's payment also indicates the purpose of the cash payment. So let's proceed to the flow of cycle or the revenue cycle. So kanina doon tayo nag-start sa customer order. So in customer order, the sales department will prepare the SO or the sales order. Now the SO will be given to the credit department. Now in credit department, i-assess niya or i-review niya yung credit transactions. After that ay i-forward na naman kay warehouse department. And then si warehouse department na naman will prepare the goods and then send it to the shipping department. So the shipping department will gonna prepare a or compare the SO from the sales department to the warehouse department to secure na same sila or same yung transaction. And then after that, the shipping department will prepare the bill of lading. So when we say bill of lading, it's a contract between the seller and the carrier. So the bill of lading will be sent to shipping department for record keeping, billing department for record keeping also, and then next is the warehouse department, and another copy for the customer. So after maka-receive si billing department ng bill of lading, i-record niya yun, tas i-prepare niya yung sales invoice attached with the remittance advice. And then, ibibigay na naman kay customer and kay inventory accounting. In inventory accounting, it says that um, nabawasan yung inventory. So, and then lastly, na makaka-receive ng sales invoice with the remittance advice is yung accounts receivable department. So, after that, we will proceed to the collection department. From the collection department, meron tayong dapat na receptionist. Tapos si receptionist will receive the check and the remittance advice from the customer. Aside from the aside from that, he will prepare the remittance list. And then after that, isisend niya na kay accounts receivable department and kay cash receipt department for deposit. So, yan yung flow ng revenue cycle. Now, let's move on to the expenditure cycle. So, the nature of this cycle encompasses both acquisition of goods and services and the payment of cash for the goods and services acquired. Now, what are the functions of this cycle? So, the business functions associated with this cycle. First one is resources are acquired from vendors and employees. So, doon tayo bibili ng mga resources sa kanila. So, number two, obligation to vendors and employees are paid. So, babayaran natin yung in-acquire natin na goods and services sa kanila. And then, the common activities for these expenditure cycle are first is a purchase requisition. So purchase requisition, it's a request from an employee that goods be purchased. Number two, purchase order requested issued by the purchasing department by vendor to purchase goods. And then number three, receiving reports. It identifies about goods received from a vendors. And then number four, vendors invoice. Vendors invoice identifies goods purchased and represents formal notice about the amount in terms of payment, also called as bill. And lastly, vouchers package. So vouchers package is a requisition, purchase order, receiving report, and invoice are often includes the summarizing document of the voucher. So let's move on to the cycle of expenditure. Now from the requisitioning, so the first step in this cycle na makikita natin is the requisitioning. Now from requisitioning, and then pupunta naman siya sa requisitioning department. And then after nila mag-request, gagawa sila ng purchase requisition form for supervisor's approval. And if na-approve na yung form na yon, ibibigay naman siya sa purchasing department. And then if approved na yung form, the purchasing order will be sent to the vendor, also kay requisitioning department and kay receiving department. Um, and kay Accounts Payable Department. So si Receiving Department will maintain cross-reference or magme-maintain ng blind copy. And then the blind copy will be forwarded to the Purchasing Department and Accounts Payable Department. So, from the Accounts Payable Department, invoice processing naman after invoice processing naman. So, after mag-match sila the purchasing order to the receiving reports. And then, ifo-forward na naman sa recording. And sa recording, i-compare naman doon yung purchase requisition and then the purchase order and the receiving report and the vendor's invoice para makita kung match lahat at kumpleto. So, continuation to ng expenditure cycle. So, sa payment naman tayo. So, from the payment, vouchers packages are sent to Accounts Payable Department for recording and Treasury Department. Kasi sa Treasury Department, i-review niya yung credit approval or voucher before the approval of check printing. So that's for expenditure cycle. So the next cycle that we will discuss is the human resource and payroll cycle. So let's move on to the human resource and payroll cycle. So in human resource, our primary objective here is to know what are the roles and responsibilities of the human resource department as well as the payroll department for the production and conversion cycle. So in human resource and payroll cycle, first thing we do is we have to start with the users department. So in the users department, the primary objective of this department is to ensure the time records prepared by the employee that represents actual hours worked during a paying period. So each department in users department will have to track or trace their employees time record. So under users department, they will monitor and approves daily time records. So yung mga nag-overtime na employee, sila yung mga taga-monitors. So after that, they will going to present it to the payroll department. So but before that, we have also the human resource department. So in human resource department has the objectives to ensure that the employees include in the payroll for rendering their services to the entity. So ano ang ginagawa ng human resource department? So they updates maintain human resource records. So they have also maintaining the information to the payroll department as to the salary wage rates which each one of them has different salary wage rates and also other pays. And also, they notify the payroll department of the terminated employees. So, isa to sa pinaka important internal control to notify the department because the next department has a big job which is the payroll department. So, si payroll department, siya yung gagawa ng payrolls for their employees. Kaya isa sa goal ng human resource will be to notify the terminated employees kasi baka masweldohan ni payroll department yung mga terminated employees. So that's why they need to monitor. So now under the payroll department, after maipass yung information needed by payroll department, they will update cumulative employee earnings records. So, and then also to prepare payroll register and consider updates on pay rates and deduction. Also, and the last one is to identify and submit to inventory any capitalizable payroll. So itong first thing that we will discuss is yung sa cumulative employee earnings that uh, the relation to the long this um, step is to relations to the long-term retirement plan, which ito yung ipapas kay accounts payable department sa future. So sa future pa to. So yung payroll under employees earnings, which is the payroll register, ito yung current or short term. So upon preparing the payroll is send naman kay Treasury Department. So aside from Treasury Department, kukuha din ng information or copy si General Accounting for recording. And yun naman yung na-identify ni capitalizable salaries kay inventory accounting for the capitalized amounts for the direct labor. So from the Treasury Department, the Treasury Department will receive the payroll register received and also received and prepares check and signed by the authorized signatory. So siya ang gagawa ng cheque or pwede naman doon sa mga debit cards ng employees. So from the Treasury Department, ibibigay nila sa employees yung mga salary nila. So now, under the general accounting, since naka-receive na ng information to the payroll register, ang gagawin na ni general accounting is they reviews daily summaries and documents and the records transactions for the reason if tama yung information na na-receive from other department. So now the inventory accounting, they will prepare the inventoriable inventoriable cost and forwards to the and then forwards ipapas naman nila kay general accounting. So as as you can observe, each department has its own responsibilities. So yun lang yung ginagawa nila to avoid management fraud or employee fraud. So yun yung sa human resource and payroll cycle. So sa production and conversion cycle naman tayo. To summarize all of the production and conversion cycle, we divided the duties and responsibilities as to the custody authorization and recording. So take note that we are in the production and conversion cycle, where in this department is responsible to convert raw materials into finished products or any goods and services na nandito sa cycle. Also, sila yung may control sa assets physically or sila yung taga-approve at sila yung taga-record ng transaction or movement ng transactions. So, these three functions are incompatible. Like, hindi sila pwedeng magkasabay. So, itong tatlo na minimin ko is si custody, authorization, and recording. So, if ever man na nagkasabay sila, the fraud and the error will occur. So, step, first thing na i-discuss natin is sa custody. So, the person assigned to perform the function here in custody is the production department. So, siya lang yung may physical custody. Now, what are the procedures performed by the auditor? So, auditor making sure that will be no error will happen Auditor also observe physical count and reconciles the result of such count to the entity's records. So sa physical count nila i-compare if match ba yung sa based on the records held by the other parties. So auditor may send confirmation request to the custodian. So now for the authorization, the production department is authorized to make normal production runs. So they are authorized kay when the moment they request that items that will be converted, it will be sent to them through material requisition form. So the auditor reviews production orders and related documents, supporting documents or production runs made by the department to determine whether it bears necessary authorization. So, i-check ni auditor yung supporting documents. Then, sa recording naman, so the person assigned in this duties and responsibilities is the cost accounting. So, si cost accounting for recording. So, after ma-finalize ni cost accounting department, the summaries will be forwarded also for recording in general accounting and posting to the general journal and ledger respectively. So, gagawa naman, next is gagawa naman ni auditor is i-review niya yung competency of the individual making journals. Also, the reconciliation of the general journal. So, i-check yan nila kung match ba yung record ni cost accounting as to record ni general journal. So, tapos na yung transaction cycle. So, pumunta naman tayo sa substantive test of transaction. Before we discuss the substantive test of transaction, we will discuss first the audit evidence. So, pag kukuha tayo ng audit evidence, it should be sufficient, appropriate evidence. So, pag sinabi nating sufficient, it pertains to the quantity. And pag sinabi nating appropriate, it pertains to the quality of evidence. So, itong audit evidence, as you can see, there is a important note says that audit evidence from different sources or different nature may often be relevant to the same assertion. So, for example, um, we will try to question, uh, for example, cash in bank. So, the question is, um, we will try to test if nag-exist ba yung bank account o hindi. So, one way na para ma-test yung existence ng cash in bank ay is magre-request tayo sa bangko ng bank confirmation or magpapadala tayo ng letter. So, if sumagot si bangko, doon mo malalaman kung nag-exist ba yung bank account. And also, if nag-exist yung bank account, malalaman mo din yung valuation. Kasi makikita mo rin yung value or laman ng bank account. So, in audit evidence, there are two classification. So, number one, ito yung mga accounting records. So, in accounting records, it affects the presentation and preparation of financial statements. And also, the number two classification of audit evidence is called the corroborating evidence. So, if you look at the accounting records, makikita natin na merong general journal, special journal, may ledger, may mga book of accounts or etc. That will belong to the accounting records underlying sa financial statements. Also, pag nagre-record tayo, may mga supporting documents like sales or sales invoice, OR, agreements, and vouchers. And then also, bank reconciliation or nagpe-prepare tayo ng uh, o, o nga, yung bank reconciliation. So, and also the computation, like the computation of interest or the computation of employee benefits and etc. Now, also in this box, may makikita tayong important note says that these accounting records are not enough evidence. So, kapag sinabi nating accounting records, ito ay internal control. So if nandun siya sa internal control, uh, nandoon din yung possibility na pwede to ma-alter either yung records itself or yung mga supporting um, documents. So So that is why uh, hindi enough yung itong mga accounting records. Ito lang yung magiging evidence when you are auditing. So now kailangan natin ng corroborating evidence or the number two classification of audit evidence. So pag sinabi natin corroborating, ito yung sumusuporta doon sa ibang nakalagay din sa financial statements or yung sinabi natin sa accounting records. So like itong minutes of meetings. For example, because you can see the plan of the management for the year. That's why makakakita ka na ng something related to financial statements or may impact sa financial statements that will help your audit evidence. So number two, confirmation to um, third parties. Like yung nagsisend ka ng like yung sinabi ko kanina na nagsisend ka ng confirmation letter sa bangko or nagsisend ka ng confirmation sa supplier or in legal. Kung meron silang third party, kung meron silang third party kasi makikita doon kung may case ka o wala. If meron man, you have to recognize provision or you have to disclose contingent liability na dapat naka-reflects doon sa financial statements. And then, analyst reports. So, dito ka maglalagay ng expectation. Kung magdi-decrease yung revenue or otherwise mag-increase yung expenses. And and also the comparable data about the competitors. So doon mo makikita yung competition sa other entity. So also next is the control manuals or yung guidelines. And lastly, the other important corroborating evidence. Now, in this cycle of substantive test, if you found out na walang internal control or not enough yung accounting records sa internal control na nag-exist dun sa company, you don't have to perform the test of control. Doon na tayo sa substantive test. If yun nga, pagkulang yung evidences. So, dito sa substantive test, dito talaga nagdi-detect ng mga material mo sa statements. So, kaya dito sa substantive test, ito yung ultimate digging of evidence. Kaya tinawag siya na test of details. So, kaya dito, tinitignan mo na yung nakalagay doon kung tama ba yun, detail by detail. So, dito, tinitignan mo din yung test of detail, transaction, balances, and disclosure. So, yung isa sa substantive test at or yung under sa test of details, ito yung ginagawa natin from the very beginning. Even hindi ka pa nakakapag substantive test called the analytical procedure. So ito yung sample audit program with substantive testing. So as you can observe, there is only one account, the cash and cash equivalent. So ang pag-audit dito is per assertion based. So ilalatag mo dito yung lahat ng management assertion. At ito ay ang existence, completeness, valuation and allocation, rights and obligation, lastly the presentation and disclosure. So, yan yung mga assertion. Also, every assertion may mga procedures na gagawin. Like sa existence, the first step that na we will do sa substantive procedure is the sending confirmation to banks. It's so just to verify or clarify the existence of the bank accounts. So, next is kailangan natin ng surprise cash count para sa cash on hand. So, also, you can perform obtaining bank cut-off because para ma-avoid yung pagka-transfer ng one bank account to the another account para tapalan yung mga kulang na pera. Kaya that's why nagka-cut off yung bangko. So the next assertion is the completeness. So the procedure is the obtaining and testing bank reconciliation and preparing proof of cash if appropriate. Also may bank cut off which is as you can observe, nahi-hit niya yung completeness, nahi-hit niya rin yung existence. So, when it comes to procedures or substantive procedures, marami talaga pwede niyang tamaan. So, also in completeness, the cash cut off test. So, sa uh, assertion ng valuation and allocation, may procedures din na sending confirmations na naman. So, pareho din sa existence, rights and obligation, and the presentation and disclosure. Kaya you can observe na number one procedure siya sa substantive kasi marami siyang nahihit na assertion. So, yung ibang procedures yung ibang procedures every assertion is may makikita kayo per assertion level. So nare-repeat lang yung mga procedures in every assertion.